Okay, welcome everybody. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd like to say thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for our webinar, 3 Tips to Reignite Your AWS Cloud Migration. I'm very excited to have our presenters here today with us, and I'm looking forward to the content that we have to share. Before we jump into the conversation today, I just wanted to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. First, and maybe most importantly, we will have time at the end of this session for a full Q&A. However, at any point in this conversation, if you do have a question that you'd like to have addressed, just use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'll do my best to find an opportunity to make sure your question gets addressed as it's pertinent in the conversation. Also, after today's conversation, an InterVision representative will be reaching out to you with a recording of today's session, as well as an opportunity to connect directly with one of our experts, our cloud experts here at InterVision. So with that underway, we'll go ahead and get this thing kicked off. But before we actually roll into the presentation itself, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce InterVision for those of you who aren't aware of who we are. InterVision is a strategic service provider with decades of experience helping IT leaders run, grow, and transform their business through the power of cloud. As you can see, we are a premier AWS consulting partner. And as part of that, we have a track record of delivering successful cloud migrations for even the most complex environments. So what are we going to be talking about today? Really, there's three big key takeaways. Why migrate to the cloud? So why are organizations migrating today? What's causing those migrations to stall? And then really the spirit of this conversation is, what are the tips we can provide from our experience to help you reignite or accelerate a stalled migration? So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. Really great group of guys here, John and Josh. So John is our Chief Technology Officer here at InterVision, and he has over 25 years of experience in IT innovation. And he leads our product engineering, product management, and development, and is a frequent host on our internal podcast, the Status Go podcast series. If you guys aren't subscribed to that, I really recommend it. It's lots of great information there. He's an early cloud adopter and a thought leader who has been part of our organization for over 14 years. Josh Famestad joined InterVision about a year ago, having made the leap from Accenture. He provided technical DevOps leadership and managed various cloud architecture projects. Today, Josh leads cloud migration and automation frameworks projects and supports a very wide range of industries. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters with our first kind of question here. So John, why are organizations migrating to the cloud today?
Yeah, so thanks, Chris, and hi, everyone. So yeah, out of today's conversation, we're hoping you'll get some ideas why, or understanding of why projects stall, and how to get them going again based on practical experience and tips we can give you. But before we jump into that, let's kind of reorient ourselves, step back, and sort of think about why go to the cloud. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around it. There's a lot of technical speak, and I'm a technologist, love the technology. We talk about auto scaling, serverless, elasticity, immutability, which lead to business agility. So what does that really mean? Well, it means that the business, frustration for them has always been that they can't get their new applications. They can't get the functionality they need to serve the clients and serve the business. They can't get it fast enough. So IT has often been seen as a blocker. So the cloud helps with that, helps with the pace of things. So, also, if done right, the cloud absolutely can be, more cost effective, can save time, and, can be more secure. So, so as a CTO, that's sort of how I look at things. And then Josh, can you give me some of your input as a practitioner who's living and breathing this stuff day to day?
Yeah, so to me, one of the big benefits is essentially the availability of resources. We don't really have to worry about whether or not we have a host right now. We know that we have the agility to scale and have what we need when we need it. And so I think to me, that's one of the biggest benefits that we have, is it really frees teams from, having to be constrained by the physical resources, and we're able to sort of breathe them into existence when we need them.
Great, guys. So with that said, what's stalling migrations? What's causing migrations to not happen as efficiently or smoothly, based on your experience, John?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. One of the things we do at InterVision, and one of the things that I do a lot of is try to basically read around a lot and take input from organizations that are out there looking at what's happening across the world. So Gartner is one of those. They do a lot of research. They publish a lot of white papers. They talk to thousands of companies, right? Forrester's another that we use both of those extensively. And what I'm always looking for are really, as an architect, I'm always looking for patterns, right? Patterns of things that work, positive patterns, and negative patterns, things that don't work. So, so that we can take and apply the good things and do our best to avoid the bad ones, right? We also pay close attention to what the industry leaders, AWS, are doing, how they're doing it, because again, they're doing it at a scale that nobody else is. They're across the world helping sell to the largest clients, the leading edge clients, all across the market. So we're looking at their best practices and helping them refine them, quite frankly. Cloud adoption framework, well-architected framework, financial management, cost optimization frameworks and approaches. So we draw from that experience that they have. And then we've got a lot of people in our company with a lot of experience, like Josh. And within our company, we've gained a lot. Each client is unique, but as much as we can, we try to leverage a consistent approach and, therefore are trying to avoid certain issues. And what we see and what's come out of this, right, is lack of expertise is one of the things that's holding companies back and causing projects to stall out. So just not having the expertise or not having the people who've got the expertise available because they're doing so many other things. Misalignment with the business. Well, expecting the cloud adoption is going to be easy and cheap is not the case, right? You've got projects to do. So initially you're going to be spending money. You've got to have the support of the business to do that, because there will probably be some surprises and issues along the way. You really need to have people ready for that, and that's often not the case. And then security in the cloud can be better, but it's different, right? So which creates a number of issues. And Josh, can you sort of expand on that topic?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on lack of expertise, and one of the ways that we see that come through is sort of a lack of understanding of the nuances of the things that we have to do to really get up. A lot of the cloud service providers in their early marketing did a lot about, look how easy this is to get everything up and running. But the fact of the matter is, it's really not that easy to put up a production system. That's much different than, spinning up a single web server and going to town. So what we find a lot of the time is that we have people think that they can start moving with a relatively small circle, and they find that there's people who aren't at the table that they need to have. We have security team gets whiff of it, and hey, they have real requirements that need to be taken care of. And so sometimes that lack of understanding of what needs to move to get up means that we don't have all of the people in the room, and we don't have that organizational alignment on how we're actually going to do it to make sure that we satisfy all of the requirements.
Thank you. So as I was saying, we look for standards here or information from the organizations like Gartner. So what they're saying here is, if you're undertaking a cloud migration project right now, you've got a 50% chance of being delayed by 2 or more years because of insufficient cloud skills. Half of the organizations are experiencing this. So that backs really, what we're saying here around skill sets. And then, another area where Gartner has, given us information is 75% of the enterprises are seeing really massive overruns in cost. So overspending by 70% in the first 18 months of cloud usage. So that's obviously going to be very poorly received within a company, right? So the ability to overcome that is really significant and really important to getting cloud migration projects moving quickly.
Great.
So, Chris.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I appreciate that. So let's get into the meat of the conversation then, right? We've established the benefits are clear, but there are some real challenges, and those challenges are manifesting themselves into stalled or slowed migrations. So how do our listeners get out in front of this?
Yeah, I mean, really, you got to step back and look at the overall projects, what needs to be done. And one of the funny things about AWS is their sales folks often run around and tell everybody how easy it is to get into the cloud. But then you start looking at their best practices in their documentation, and well, here is their diagram on how to do migrations. There's 8 different skill sets kind of needed at once here across, different areas to get the applications moving, get migrated, the governance, the, sort of scheduling and control of the project, building out the landing zone, dealing with security operations, and then thinking about, the softer side of things, skills, culture, change and leadership. All of those things need to happen. There are certain areas that are more important. We'll get into that than others. But really, that's what's going on. So no wonder these things are difficult to achieve at any scale. So Josh, can you add some color there again from your sort of practitioner experience?
Yeah, so I think, like you kind of mentioned earlier, there's a lot of great white papers and frameworks that give a lot of the high level detail describing how to set up a cloud center of excellence, how to, really start your transition. But a lot of them are pretty high level. And so sometimes getting through and understanding how that maps into your organization and how we move your workloads takes a bit of fill in the blank. And sometimes it's, we find ourselves leaning a lot on our experience as we're figuring out how to do that, right? There's a lot of different tooling that we might use in the discovery and the assessment phase to figure out, sort of how these applications play together and what's important with them. There's a lot of maybe some DevOps tooling we might want to bring in as we get into the run side of it too, to help make sure that we're operating efficiently on the stuff we've already moved. So I think that really there's just a lot of blanks to fill in.
Yeah. So, what we're seeing is the approach is changing somewhat. Early on, a few years back, we were seeing organizations just sort of dump a wheelbarrow load of applications, workloads into the cloud following a sort of straightforward lift and shift approach, rehosting, and then not doing much with them. And that led to the overrun in costs and performance issue. So the approach we're seeing here, which Forrester kind of has given the tag of move, then improve, that is the approach we're seeing. And that is the approach that is most common and attainable, to be honest. A lot of refactoring up front is nice if you can do it to make applications elastic and auto scale and all of that. But it's a lot more work, it's risk, it requires testing. So certainly for some applications that makes sense, but for the majority, the move, then improve. So rehost them or light replatforming, and then immediately start looking at, monitoring and optimization and cost optimization, how to incrementally make the applications more cloud native. So that's the approach that is really starting to take hold. So, from that, there are a number of areas that we've really sort of focus on. Chris, if you can just move us along here onto the next topic. So, when I look at this, as a CTO, right, and having run a lot of IT projects over the years and architected and delivered and all that, these are the things, they're similar to a lot of IT projects, quite frankly. You've got to find the right expertise, right? Whether that's in your organization and getting them freed up so they can focus on this and keeping them on the project, or whether it's, then pulling in people from outside. You need the right team and you need to grow that expertise. You've got to have executive sponsorship. I know everybody says this, but you've got to have somebody who's there for you from the executive team. And then looking into the detail around the workloads and the dependencies. So these 3 areas, we're going to go into them a little deeper here, but what we found is if you can do these 3 things right, you've got a pretty good chance of success. So let's talk more about the expertise Again, the way I look at this is kind of coming in early on the project. How do we, assess the skills of the people we have? Consider developing an internal center of excellence, is the term that everybody's using now. A group of people who really are skillful at the various things that need to be done across those different areas that we showed on the diagram earlier. And then how do you train that group out? What training do you need? Is it certifications, Cloud Guru, Linux Academy? Or what is it you need to do to get the team more up to speed? And, often, get a partner to help do the work and educate your team along the way. Josh, I know you've got some pretty strong feelings in a number of these areas.
Yeah, so I think, you kind of described the concerns. I think, that's why we built our process to include, that skill assessment across the staff during our migration readiness assessment. And so that gives us a chance to really dig in and make sure that we do have the strong skills that we need, because we're going to manage the resources differently when we get up into AWS, right? Essentially, we're moving into software-defined infrastructure, and so we need to have people that are able to write the configuration code to deploy the resources. We need people who are able to, sort of implement a different management philosophy.
So what have you seen that's typically tripped people up as they make that paradigm shift?
So essentially, you're managing resources much differently, right? And so you have teams that are learning how to manage their application in a new environment, but the march of the migration schedule a lot of the time isn't stopped, right? So we have a team who's pushing the migration forward, and they're really sort of stalled now on managing the new applications. So they have things like the way that they generate their Terraform configurations, if that's what they're using, or maybe their CloudFormation templates. We find that some of the teams maybe aren't as quick at generating those as they might be if they've been doing it before. And so, we run into timeline pressures with management. We come into, certain spots where we didn't realize that the security guy was interested in this until, it was time to talk to him, and we found out we had a bigger problem that we had to work through. So I think a lot of the time that expertise really means getting the right people in the room, knowing who those right people are. And as you say, setting up that center of excellence really gives us a great way to sort of codify that and identify those people.
So I remember when you and I first met and you were still working at Accenture on a very large project. Accenture was plowing in enormous resources to get you and your team and the people in the company up to speed. Can you describe a few things that you saw that were successful at that scale, for one of the largest companies in the world?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things we did was a lot of prototypes, and we started doing them early. So, probably a year or maybe even more before we started our migration, we were starting to run some very small POC services up in AWS. We were starting to experiment with our DevOps tool chain in the cloud. We were starting to experiment with running components of our application just to understand how it would work. We run an Oracle stack, and we expected some challenges with that, and we wanted to make sure that we could get out ahead of them. And so I really think that sort of that early experimentation let us, build some expertise on our team. And then the other thing is, we sort of understood our application in particular a lot better and how it behaves as it moves. So I think it was, really that experimentation and incremental moving forward of what we were able to do.
So what were some of the surprises from that? Because the size of that application was enormous, because I was involved in helping initially help the customer decide to migrate it. So,
well, we had some challenges getting WebLogic running on an AMI inside of Amazon. We had to bring in some additional libraries and do some debugging there to get that up and running. That was interesting. You can't always expect your application to just run, without additional effort if they don't have the base AMIs that you're looking for. Right? Some of the other things that we came up with, just the sheer complexity of it. Our application had, many, many deployable components across multiple application servers. And, now we need to try and make those environments ephemeral so that we can manage them in a more effective strategy. We know that this is an environment where we're going to have much, much, much more change. And we had to sort of move away from, kind of more that pet-based management philosophy into more of a cattle-based management philosophy where, when it's time to when it's time to maintain something, we may just kill and replace it.
So I mean, what I'm getting at there is there's a pretty multifaceted, or you need a lot of different expertise. You need to be broad and deep on your team, right? To be able to find and then overcome all the things that are going to come up and find the right way to make them work in the cloud effectively, and really think about the parts of the you move first. So which I mean, it really drives us along, I think, to understanding your business case, right, as to why you're moving. Again, this is part of getting executive sponsorship. Have the business case, really know your total cost of ownership and the ROI that you're going to get going to the cloud. That will get your, often cases, that will get your chief financial officer or the equivalent really interested and probably positive for this project and be pushing for it to happen. Particularly these days, as people are increasingly wanting to switch from CapEx to OpEx, so they don't have to push out large chunks of cash right now because cash is king. So, having the business case and having an executive sponsor who deeply understands it, or ideally, across the executives, and then, pushing that ownership out is what I always look for on IT projects, but particularly for cloud, because the cloud, it's not adding new business functionality for you. You're replacing technology. So in some ways, it's not super exciting to the business, right? They want new stuff, whereas you're replacing kind of the foundational things so that you can then more quickly get them what they want, but you've got to get them owning the transition. And then identifying the risks, right? And planning on how to hopefully avoid them, but if you hit them, mitigate them, and then being ready for the unexpected, and having your technology team running in a way that the governance is integrated with the overall organization, that you're not off on a limb. So those are things I really sort of try to do in all technical projects, but cloud adoption particularly. So if you can do that from my standpoint, you're going to be at least, somewhat successful. So Josh, I don't know if you've got any thoughts there, perhaps around risks and other areas.
Yeah, I think really the executive sponsor comes in really handy when we get to decisions that have to be made. A lot of the time we get in spots where, the shape of the security concerns, the shape of the networking concerns have changed, right? And it's a different approach to dealing with them. And so sometimes we want teams to, take a look at some new technology, some new ways of operating to understand it. And every now and again, that does need a little nudge from the top. There's things that come up as far as trade-offs on scheduling versus cost. And, those can freeze a team without somebody there to, make an executive decision and push us forward. And so, I think absolutely having an executive sponsor is a firm requirement of being.
What I have done here often in these sort of projects is spent time with the team, people like Josh, identify the things that are going to be risky and difficult, and then gotten the executive group together, taken them through it, and to somewhat scare them to get their attention and get their involvement and get their expectations set that this is not going to be straightforward. It's probably going to have some issue bumps along the way, and get them help solving those problems, leaning in or ready to. So as you say, a nudge from the top. So it's, can't be overstated the importance of this area. And then, so that's kind of, we talked about people, the expertise, and then how to sort of govern and run the project. Now we get down into the more technical area, which is deeply understanding the applications that are going to move. I tell our teams, we cannot know too much about a client's environment and about their applications. So, use tooling, and, Josh, you can talk about that in a minute, and then really, just learn, right? And identify things, apps that are migration ready, easy to move, and workloads that are not. If you can get the operating systems up to date, sort of re-platforming, that's a good thing to do. It makes it easier, removing some of the technical debt before you go. Thinking about which applications are going to move, which you're going to make part of the initial proof of concept migration. And then, detailed planning is really helpful here, right? Because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different disciplines involved, and you really need to get them all down on in a schedule and then move through it in phases, right? So that you can do a development environment first that's not so important, find out what works and what doesn't. And then by the time you get to production, it goes a lot more smoothly. So Josh, can you hit on how we go about assessing application dependencies from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we like to use is AWS does provide a discovery tool where we can install an agent in the on-prem environment before we do the move and let that monitor traffic for some time. That lets us see which applications are actually hitting other servers and which ports they're talking on, and we can start to understand some of those interdependencies that might not be as obvious between applications. And so it's a good opportunity to kind of catch things that are missed as we go through and inventory the applications. And that's one that's important because we don't always get to choose the order of the migrations, right? If there's something that depends on other applications or has things that need to be there, we need to make sure that we know to move it up first. And if there's a missed dependency, it's going to affect the schedule since we're going to have to take care of that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of stepping back again, when we think about what are the root of the challenges around cloud migration. It's the talent, right, is expensive, and people are expensive and hard to hold on to quite often. The migration work is just an IT thing. It's not adding business capabilities. So that can cause staff to get pulled off the projects to go work on cool new business functionality. Security and compliance is different, right? And a traditional approach is to outsourcing this to companies can be, pretty expensive, not necessarily, the easiest thing to do. So you've really got to figure out how you want to go about this. But, generally, what Gartner's finding is, half the organizations attempting to do this don't have the staff they need, right? So how do we, solve that? One of the ways that InterVision is helping solve this for our clients is that we've teamed up with AWS, and we're launching, or we've launched recently, AWS's Managed Service as a partner. So it's Managed Services by InterVision. So what this is about is Amazon themselves manage the lowest level part of this, the servers, the EC2 instances, the networking, and then InterVision is doing a lot of the work around that. So, help a client with the migration and then with the ongoing work involved after the migration. And it's that operational side of things that often causes projects to stall, because once you get the workload up into the cloud, it's in production. Now you got to operate there, monitor, troubleshoot, and all of that. Josh, can you kind of dive into some more of the details on how this particular service works, this solution?
So AMS, essentially, we move the applications into a Amazon controlled account, and that puts it behind an ITIL process with tickets to access. So it's actually set up so that we don't have access, AWS doesn't have access, and you don't have access into that account, except for through a just-in-time access grant via the change control process. So putting the environment behind the glass with type change controls and using AWS's advanced CI/CD capabilities and frankly, automated management capabilities, we can manage that account very efficiently, very effectively. And then your team doesn't fall into that trap I mentioned earlier where, the liability of those applications you've already migrated starts hobbling the team into further migrations.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so now, if you think about this sort of solution, what it does is it helps accelerate organizations up the curve. When I first started talking with Amazon about this service, they've implemented it for some of the largest companies in the world. And now with us, we're starting to help them roll it out. We're rolling out to small and mid-sized companies. It helps once you start getting workloads into the cloud, it helps you move on to the next group of workloads. So it gets you up the curve here beyond the discovery, the foundational planning, and the initial ingestion of applications, so that you can then accelerate. So some really good numbers coming back. Forrester has done research around the implementation of AWS Managed Services. Companies are seeing tremendous ROI, all kinds of, positive, you know, money savings and improved security, across the board. There are good reasons to do this. Another is, around security, right? So, organizations, like we're saying, one of the challenges is understanding security in the cloud. And then, for example, understanding how to build a HIPAA compliant environment in the cloud really requires some deep knowledge. How do you make everything encrypted and all of that in an environment that, if it's you doing it, your team, you're doing it for the first time. So you're challenged learning how to do it, whereas with AMS, the environment comes up that way. So, with Amazon building it out. So it's highly secure, highly compliant. And this, accelerates the migration. It will likely go a little slower to begin with, but then the speed that's picked up is tremendous. And the ROI here, 243%. So, many reasons to go this way. It is pretty rigorous in the way it's managed. So there can be, certain workloads that maybe it's not right for. But, in an awful lot of situations, this is a really great solution for organizations. So, kind of summing up again, to uninstall and reignite your projects, get the right team together. If it requires bringing in outside help, because a cloud migration is a project, and it's an additional workload. So if you're trying to use staff who are already fully busy, chances are that's not going to work well. Get the ownership, get people leaning in, skin in the game from the executives, and really dive deeply into understanding your workload, your dependencies. Can't know too much about that. If you can pull those three things off, then you're gonna be okay. So to help you with that, InterVision has a variety of services we offer. Cloud enablement services, where we will give you a full-time resource or even part-time resource to help your team move through the various phases. Really, you get a senior architect. We can rotate different people through that offering, so that if you need security help, we bring you in a security expert, AWS security expert. When you get to data, we've got DBAs. So that can be sort of a way to get your team help. We can take on the full migration, whether it's into AWS Managed Services or into your own custom AWS landing zone, really however you want it. So we fit with our clients as to their needs and where they are, and whether their team is very, skillful, but perhaps overworked, or whether they really don't have much of an IT team and will come in and do the entire thing. So, Chris, I know, you probably had some points you want to make that I've missed here.
Yeah, no, I just, thanks, John, for that. I did want to first mention that we did have some questions come in, and I want to make sure those folks get their questions answered before we move on here. So if I can go ahead and fire some of those at you guys, feel free to parse them out as necessary. So one of the first ones that came up, actually, Josh, as you were rolling through some of the pieces about tools, is what is an overview of the suite of tools that folks should be looking at as part of their migration?
That really depends on a lot of the details of what we're doing. When we get into things like resource provisioning, I tend to reach for Terraform, because I like that it crosses cloud platforms and it lets teams, if we do end up in a multi-cloud environment, it's okay. And I also like the syntax and some of the primitives that they give for networking. As we get into, source code and source control for managing all of the infrastructure as code repositories, it kind of depends on where we are. AWS does give some native services like code commit and code build that we can use to store the source code and do some pipelines. Sometimes we like to use other tools that have a little bit more features, like maybe GitLab or GitHub, to store the source code for what we're moving around. You have configuration management can sometimes play a role in some of your AMI management strategies. So we like to use pipelines to build the AMIs so that we have a way of maintaining up-to-date machine images to use on our instances, as opposed to kind of keeping that gold copy that somebody manually changes. We might use a provisioner like Chef or like Ansible inside of one of our AMI pipelines to sort of par bake our images, so that when we do maybe insert something into an auto scaling group, there's less to do to bring it up to what it needs to be, so things can run a little bit faster and be a little bit closer to that end state, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, so that's a pretty wide-ranging, sophisticated tool set. We oftentimes are using particular tools because that's what our clients want us to use. So our team's skilled in a variety of tools. And then we use tools like Risk Cloudscape to do application discovery, in addition to the cloud native tools, Cloud Chomp, Cloud Endure is one we use to doing, simple rehost migrations. So the tools that are pretty much constantly changing. So we, as an organization, spend a lot of time learning the tools, working with the companies that are providing the tools to improve them. We quite often find bugs in some of the tools and get them fixed. And so it's an area that's constantly evolving. And for us as a company, we invest a ton of time and money in our teams. Like people like Josh who learn them, become very adept with them. Unfortunately, with the way the market is, we can't just pick one and stick with it. What we've seen over the years is that there are new ones coming out that may be better, and where cost optimization, cloud management platforms have changed dramatically as governance at scale. There's just a lot of things that have evolved as organizations have gone more fully into the cloud and at greater scale.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Jumping on to one a little bit more financially focused here. So looks like AWS helps with funding for migrations. What's available there in terms of that funding?
Yeah, let me grab that first. There's all kinds of funding help. What AWS is after, if you sort of step back and think about how they make money by getting people into the cloud and then the OpEx billing. They don't make money by having people sort of do POCs and a few workloads. So they're very motivated to help with the migration projects. And depending on the scale of the migration, they will inject a lot of money to get the projects done in a variety of ways. And if you want, it can get pretty complex. So if people really want more information on that, that's something where we can follow up with them. But there's, for example, there's additional funding they will give to get Microsoft workloads. So if you're, a heavy Microsoft shop, to get those into AWS, there's even more funding. So there's lots of things right now. They're essentially paying us to do AppStream and Workspace implementations for clients who've been obviously heavily hit by COVID, which is, a form of migration. So that, initial work is actually being paid for up to, I think, something, like the first 50 hours of our time. So that essentially it's free to the client. So it's constant work. I mean, we've got a team of people that work with Amazon to understand all their different funding things, because they're constantly changing, and how we can bring those to our clients.
Great, thanks, John. So another one that came in is, if our migration's going slower than expected, what service should we move forward with? Where should we start?
If the migration is going slower than expected, it kind of depends. I mean, Josh,
we have to talk a lot about why it slowed down. This is one where we'd really have to do a detailed conversation with you and understand what sorts of things you've been running into, whether it's been more of a skill shortfall, whether it's been inability to meet certain requirements that are coming in. I think we'd really have to understand what has slowed progress to be able to understand how we move you forward from there.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So please, if you have any more questions anyone out there listening, please send them along either in chat or Q&A. But Just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I hope you found this information insightful. For those of you who registered and attended, we are going to be sending out an an Amazon gift card to you. So be on the lookout for that. Additionally, our team will be following up with you with an email that'll include the link to the recording of today's conversation. So you can share that out as you wish to your team. And then also we'll have the opportunity to connect with an InterVision cloud expert. And really, on the InterVision side, I think the spirit of what we'd like to communicate is that no matter where you are in your cloud maturity, there are different ways we can support you. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a fully managed service that you have to turn everything over to us. It might just be some consulting, a conversation to see if we can help, just move things along in your migration process. So if you do have any needs, or if your migration isn't moving as smoothly as you like, please don't hesitate to respond to that email and we can get that conversation rolling for you. So thanks again, John. Josh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
I see other questions coming in, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up a little early here today, but I'm sure the folks will appreciate the additional time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe out there.